Hello, my name is Neil Shelley, and today I'm going to show you how to repair the new Blendtec model Stealth. Now the Stealth has two models. You have the CQB1 and the IQB1 for above counter and in counter. This is the above counter version here. Repair process is essentially the same. So to start with, we need to get rid of the sound enclosure. So we open it up, flex it out, and it will lift right off. We're going to set that aside. Now the base of the sound enclosure is the same thing. I'm just going to turn it around. We're going to flex it out and tilt it back, and off it comes. Now with that out of the way, I'm going to put a little bit of a cloth or some paper towels down just to protect this top portion of the housing from getting scratched. We'll set that on there. So we've got the machine sitting here. Now I'm going to show you the tools you're going to need to do the repair. So first off, I like to use a powered screwdriver. You are going to need a long bit. I use the number 2 Phillips here. It's always nice to have a hammer handy. Some needle nose pliers. And an Allen wrench. This is a 9mm or a 3/8 inch. That's what you're going to need. All right. So let's open this up. So the first thing we're going to do is just loosen up the 4 screws. All right, now we've got those loosened. The bottom plate's going to come off. And it's going to kind of catch on this baffle piece, which should stay with it. It's totally fine. Just leave it there. Set that whole thing aside. Now we can lift the power cord out. You see how easy that quarter shrink comes in and out. And the middle housing will come right off. Just feed the power cord through. Set the middle housing aside. Now use some caution when you're taking those off. You don't want to scratch the plastic. Keep it looking nice. Okay, with that open, we can see the motor. We've got this little gasket over the electronics. We can go ahead and peel that up and off. Just set that aside. We've got our electronic board and we've got our motor. Now again, this is a capacitive touch electronics. There's no touch pad to connect anything. It's just as it is. All right. So let's begin by disconnecting our power cord. We have our earth, our line, and our neutral. These are quick connects. Just brace and pull them up. Okay. Set your power cord aside. I'll just set that down there for now. All right, and then you have your motor wires. And you can see here we've got a black and a white one. The motors may come double black, double white. Again, these don't matter. They're not a polar motor. So you're just going to pull up, disconnect that ground. That one will be a little tighter. Disconnect this motor. And the final one to disconnect is our thermistor here. This is your temperature sensor. Just pulls right off. Okay? So all the wires are now disconnected. So in order to do these repairs on this machine, we're going to disconnect the motor from the housing. You can see it's retained with these 4 screws and washers. So we're just going to loosen those up. Now that 4th screw is actually under the electronic board. The electronic board is just held in by a couple of little retaining clips, just 2 of them. So you can just take this out, lift it up. You're going to have to work around this rubber post for the USB connector. Just gently take it out. Now on the bottom of this board are the LEDs and the display. So you want to be very careful with this board. Once you've removed it, you'll break LEDs, you'll crack the display. So set that aside and be very careful with it. And with that out, we now have access to that 4th screw, and we can just undo that. And what you'll want to do is set these aside. Now under each screw you have this brass washer and then you have a rubber washer. Okay, so don't lose those. Just set all of those aside. And that'll include the ground wire screw. All right, so now with all the screws removed, we can disconnect the top housing. Just lift that up and over real careful. You'll see the gasket here has stayed attached. You can disconnect that if you like. It's not necessary. It may stay attached to the motor. Either way, it's a removable part. So we're going to set that aside. So now we're just down to the motor assembly. And this is one of our best designs yet, because the fan, put your Allen wrench into the socket and just twist the fan off. No sharp edges, no metal. Okay, just comes right off. Set it aside. Then we've got our motor. Now, unlike our other motors, this one is much easier to repair the brushes. What we have is these little clips. Just unpop those two, undo those, off it comes, and then all we have to do is very carefully pop the brush out. And then the wires are loose. Now the bracket's held in with 2 screws, so we can undo that and remove the bracket and the field assembly. Now I like to just take the field and the motor off together, or the field and the bracket off together. It's easy. These almost never need to be replaced. Set those aside. You'll notice on what we have left, the thrust washer has stayed on the armature, and this is the orientation it should go back into when you replace it. Okay, so just set that aside, don't lose it. Now, as far as taking the armature out of the top housing here, the sling ring is still retaining it to this piece, and so we're going to do like we do with our other motors. We're going to put our Allen wrench in, and we're just going to tap it off. Now, once you pop that out, you just take your armature off, set it aside, you have your casting, and the sling ring should be retained on the Allen wrench. All right. Now, this armature has a magnet disc mounted under the bearing. This is specific to the Stealth model. This is non-repairable, so if there's something that happens with the armature, you're replacing the entire assembly. All right. So, we've got it all the way down to constituent parts. Let's go ahead and rebuild it. So we're going to put our top casting here. Now, the other difference, before I forget, this armature, unlike our others, does not utilize the rubber bearing cup. Instead, you'll put a couple of drops of locking compound, Loctite or some similar, and then you just press it in. Okay, and in it goes. Now we grab our thrust washer, place that back on the bearing, like so, the little feet down, touching the outer race. Then we take our field, and we're going to slide that over the armature. Pop the bracket down over that thrust washer. Okay, and we're going to want to make sure that our field wires are coming out of these little holes here. We don't want to pinch any wires and have a dead short, which will cause the motor to fail. Tighten those down. All right. Now for the best part, putting our brushes back in. Just slide them into these locations. Take your field wire, and that's just going to go here to the side of the brush. Okay, just put that in there and press it down, real gentle like. Okay, and then we take our top bracket, and we just snap that back on into place. Okay, super easy. And then we can take our sling ring. Let me grab my pad. Set that down. Now resting on the shaft of the armature, and you want to be very careful. You're not going to hit this hard. Just place your sling ring on. If you hit it too hard, you're going to bend the shaft of the armature, and then it's going to run out of balance. So we're just going to tap this on. Nice and flush. Flip it back over. And we can reattach our fan. You can see there's no way to get this one on wrong. Just get it on there and thread it on. This will just be hand tight with the Allen wrench. Okay. So now that we've got that assembly back in, we can put it back into the housing. So we're going to start with, let's just take this gasket off. And we can just feed the wires through it, slip it over. And we just make that line up with those 4 posts, seat it into the groove. And this is going to have a little bit of adhesive on it. You don't have to replace the adhesive, but it's going to be a little tacky. Okay, so we got the gasket on. We want to make sure these two ribs are to the sides, and now we're going to put the top plate on. So we're going to feed our wires through. Just slide that down. Make sure all your wires are coming up and through. Place that down over the gasket. And then we can replace all of our rubber gaskets over the screw holes. And again, just remember, there's no top or bottom to these. They're the same on the top and the bottom. So those just go on however. And then we do our brass washers. And then we can go ahead and start doing screws. Now on your ground wire, we've got the ground wire here with the screw going through the lug. We're going to want to hold the wire as we screw this in so it doesn't flip around, because we want it in this kind of position in the housing. So don't go too fast so it doesn't flip around in your hand. Okay. Now, with that all done, we can retrieve our electronic board. And just a reminder, be very careful with the LEDs in the display. You don't want to scratch them or break them. Now this little feature here actually tucks in under the field. That's where your speed sense is at. And don't forget, you're going to have to work around that, that little retaining plug for the USB. So just pull that up. Make sure those are into the little retaining clips. If you recall, those are here and on the opposite side. We get those in. We take our gasket, put our gasket back on, and we can reconnect our motor wires. So, as with all Blendtec motors, the wires are non-polar, so they can hook up either way. They are labeled, so you do have motor A and motor B. Make sure you push them on all the way. You don't want them to become loose and fall off. You'll get a dead short on the machine. And the final wire here, the thermal sensor, bring that around and connect it. And you do have all your earth wires here by the motor. The 2-post, doesn't matter which one you hook it up to. But with this short jumper, it's easier to go to the closest one. Okay, with those wires connected, we can retrieve our power cord. We'll make those connections. So we have our earth. Push that on all the way. And your neutral and your line, these are labeled on the board so that you can't get them into the wrong position without trying hard. Push those on. Retrieve our middle housing. Feed the power cord up through it. Set this over, pull all your wires up, make sure they're not being pinched. Should go down nice and easy, just like that. You can tuck your wires down now that you know they're not pinched. So all I'm doing here is just pushing them down into this open cavity. Just getting them out of the way for when we put that bottom housing on. Cord can come over out of the way as well. And then you can just pop the cord restraint in. There's nothing really holding that in place right now. So then we can put our bottom plate on. This might be easier without the screws in, so I've taken them out. So then you retrieve your screws, drop those in, and tighten up. And finally, we can turn it over and we can reconnect our sound enclosure. Start from the back. Turn it this way so you can see. We're going to start from the back and just spread that out. Okay? And then the top, put on one side. And the top we're just going to put on one side and then spread, pop, done. Okay, so that's the repair method. If you run into anything odd, feel free to contact us right away and we'll help you out.